members, staff, and guests. Multiple staff members are present to make sure that the meeting runs smoothly and all applicants and citizens are able to communicate with the commission at the appropriate times. Staff, can we please have a roll call?
Ms. Branham?
Here.
Mr. Broom?
Here.
Mr. Dinkins?
Present.
Mr. Salibi?
Here.
Mr. Wolf?
Here.
We have quorum.
Thank you. In order to avoid ex parte communications, DDRC members are under strict instructions not to discuss cases under consideration with the public or with each other outside of the public forum. The meeting typically starts with staff calling the case, giving a summary of the project, and then calling on the applicant to present if they wish. Decisions are typically made in one evening. Decisions may be appealed within 30 days to a court of competent jurisdiction. Oaths will be administered individually as we hear either from applicants or from live speakers. Applicants with requests before the DDRC are allotted a presentation time of 10 minutes. This time should include, but is not limited to, an overview of the project, case history, and any pertinent meetings held regarding the request. This time also includes all persons presenting information on behalf of the applicant, such as attorneys, engineers, and architects. This time limit does not include any questions asked by the DDRC or staff regarding requests. Members of the general public are given the opportunity to address their concerns in intervals of 2 minutes. Applicants may have 5 minutes to respond. Staff has a timer and will make presenters aware of when their time has expired. Staff, are there any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes.
Thank you. Frozen here.
I'll continue reading while we try to resolve that issue.
Oh, thank you.
The DDRC uses the consent agenda to approve non-controversial or routine matters by a single motion and vote. If a member of the DDRC or the general public wants to discuss an item on the consent agenda, that item is removed from the consent agenda and considered during the meeting. The DDRC then approves the remaining consent agenda items. And I will
staff please read the consent agenda?
Certainly. The first item is 2113 Marion Street, a request for a preliminary certification for the Bailey Bill in the Cottontown Bellevue Architectural Conservation District. The second is 1528 Sumter Street, a request for a certificate of design approval for an addition to an individual landmark.
Is there anyone from the DDRC that would like any item removed from the consent agenda? Is there anyone from the public that would like to have an item removed from the consent agenda? All right, do I have a motion and a second to remove an item from the consent agenda? Hearing none. Do I have a motion and second to accept the consent agenda subject to all conditions contained in the case summaries as well as the November minutes?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Broom?
Yes.
Ms. Branham?
Yes.
Mr. Dinkins?
Yes.
Mr. Salibi?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolf? Motion passes.
Okay, moving right along to the regular agenda. The first case is for 737 Gadsden Street. This is a request for certificate of design approval for new construction in the Innovista Design District. The request is for the new construction of a 12-story, 616 square foot, 310 unit private student dormitory with 12,000 square foot of retail and 545 structured parking spaces. The project will also require site plan review and approval from the Planning Commission, which is currently scheduled for, it actually is going to be in February of 2023. And I will just read a couple of the comments from staff that are related to the recommendation. I'm not going to read through the whole evaluation, and then we'll have the applicant come up and present. So under the section 1.4 setbacks, the maximum setback in the MC district is 10 feet. The applicant has received several variances for setbacks from the Board of Zoning Appeals to include a maximum setback on Green Street of 15 feet, a maximum setback on Divine of 15 feet, and a maximum setback on Gadsden of 35 feet. While the scale of the building warrants some additional sidewalk space to accommodate the volume of pedestrian activity, staff has concerns about the Gadsden Street drop-off lane. This feature introduces an auto-oriented driveway into the continuous pedestrian sidewalk zones described as parking lane, edge, furnishing zone, pedestrian through zone, and frontage zone in the pedestrian design guidelines of the city's engineering manual. A preferred alternative would be bump outs at the street corners, as well as mid-block if desired, in a lane adjacent to the curb dedicated to drop-off zones, bus stops, and/or parking. The staff recommendation, pardon me, staff finds that the proposal substantially meets the Innovista design guidelines and recommends approval of the request conditional upon working through the following items with staff. Reconfiguring the Gadsden Street drop-off zone to be a continuous lane adjacent to the curb with bump outs and reducing the building setback accordingly. Explore providing additional fenestration on the first floor Divine Street elevation. That all signage will be reviewed and approved by staff and must meet the Innovista design guidelines, and that all other details will be deferred to staff for review and approval. And Donnie Kim, the architect, is here to present the project, and they'll walk through the slides.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. If you would, please state your name and whether you swear to tell the truth in these proceedings.
My name is Donnie Kim, the architect, and I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you.
Okay, so what you see in front of you is the site plan for the project. To your left is the Green Street, the overpass, the new overpass. Along the top is the Gadsden Street, and on the right would be the Divine Street. This is made up of 3 different wings along the 3 streets with a raised courtyard, which you will see in just a minute on the floor plans, and a parking deck towards the bottom. In general, the parking access is on the Divine Streets toward the bottom of the page there into the parking deck, with the fire truck access towards the bottom of the page there with the surface parking. And then the access to the buildings start from a top left-hand corner. There will be a main entry to the left wing there along the Green Street. The main entry lobby to the student housing project will be towards the middle, and you see the 3 empty spots for future retail along Gadsden and Divine Street. So if I could go to the next page here, this is the first floor plan. The blue in the middle with the main lobby space for the student housing project with leasing offices. To the right, the L shape, the reverse L shape, would be the retail spaces, and below that would be the bike parking that meets the zoning, and then you can see the parking entry there with the arrows below that. You can see the entry to the parking deck and how it stacks, and if I direct your attention back to the top, between the blue and the yellow is a breezeway that's exposed to air to allow passage from the street to the parking lot and the courtyard. So this would be the typical floor plan above the first floor plan. So you can see the residential units surrounding the street sides, as well as you can see kind of how the parking that works towards the bottom. These are a little hard to read, but you'll see it better when we get to the renderings. But these are the elevations. On the top would be the Gadsden Street elevation. The materials you also see later are they're all precast panels, brick, storefronts, curtain walls. The drawing below would be along the Green Streets. And these are some of the elevations. On the bottom is elevation along Divine. Again, you'll see this better in the renderings. And on the top is the view from the train track, the south elevation, if you will. Go to the next one. So this is a view from the corner of Gadsden and Green. You can see that we're trying to activate the streets and the corner of Gadsden and Green by having the clear curtain walls and the storefronts above. And we have along the Gadsden Street, along the first floor, we have all storefronts. So so that it opens up to the streets, to activate the street as well. And you'll see that all the materials shown here, we've tried to model the correct offsets that we have between the brick, and you can see the two different types of precast that are being used, one light, one dark. This would be a simulated night view of the same view. And this is an elevation or the view from the corner of Gaston and Divine. Again, the storefronts lining the first floor or ground floor for retail to open it up to the streets. And again, having the open corner and different massing here to break up the massing. And this would be the view of the interior courtyard from the train track side. Same material palettes. The view. And these are some of the materials that we're currently reviewing. So on the right, you see 4 different types of precast finishes. We're still reviewing it. It'll be different shades of precast and different, what they call sandblast, to give it the texture. So we're still receiving samples, but wanted to give you an idea of what we're reviewing, but it'll be in this general family or the tone to match the renderings. On the left are the red bricks that we're reviewing. These will be cast into the precast, so we need to make sure that they are PCI compliant, meaning they could work with the precast panels. So we're still reviewing samples, but this is a general tone of the brick that we are currently reviewing. And we have a quick fly-through video to show the overall sort of feel for the project.
Okay, thanks. Chaz, please play the video. Thank you.
So this is looking at it from the arena side. You see the new overpass there on the right. It's a very quick video, but and you can see the different finish of the precast, the light and the dark. We are changing the time of the day throughout the video, so that's why you see different types of shadows. But this is from Gaston and Divine. You can see the entry to the parking there. And then we're going around to the parking deck side, the fire access road from the train track side. And this would be the raised courtyard above the parking, surface parking below. And this is a loop, so we could.
Thanks, Chaz. We can go back to the slideshow now. Thank you.
That is the end of my presentation.
Great, thank you very much. Do any DDRC members have questions?
Okay.
Okay. I noticed service drive between the railroad tracks and the building itself. That serves service to the dumpster area.
Correct.
And when I was looking at it, you can't, it's dead end. And I realized there's a bridge on that end.
Yes.
So I guess that's acceptable to the fire department and whomever. But I'd like to know how the service, are they going to be able to turn around to go back the other way?
Yes, sir. So we've reviewed the preliminary plans with the fire department as well for their access, and we did the truck turn study with our civil engineer to make sure the trucks can turn and back out to Divine
Okay.
Street. Yep.
Since Planning Commission took over the site plan review, where does our purview end or begin with, like, reconfiguring the drop-off zone?
Well, I mean, the DDRC still has purview over the urban design parts of the project. So a lot of the guidelines are architectural, but a lot of them are also how pedestrians and cars interface with the building. So, parking, how people get to the building, how people are walking. So those are still urban design issues for the DDRC. The Planning Commission will see this after the first of the year, but the DDRC can certainly make recommendations about those things. Setbacks are part of the guidelines, et cetera.
I just don't want to conflict with planning commission, but no, I understand. I think there probably is still some overlap.
There is some overlap, for sure. I guess to help, to add on to that, the Planning Commission site plan review is a technical review that's based on staff recommendations, so they don't have guidelines, if you will. So they are taking what staff recommends about the site plan. So the site plan comments that come from planning and urban design staff are based on our, things like Walk by Columbia and the engineering regulations and the urban design guidelines. So when we provide those comments, those are based on documents that go to Planning Commission for approval.
So they're just based on the code, their approval.
Basically, the guidelines, of course, in the Innovista design guidelines have recommendations about building orientation and setbacks, but they're not code. But that's how we make our recommendations, is sort of based on those principles.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, so Mr. Kim, I was wondering if, first of all, lovely design. I think it's going to be a really nice addition to the area, so we appreciate that. Do you have any problem with going with the recommendation of the staff about changing that drop-off?
We're actually reviewing it right now with our civil and landscape designers to see how we can accommodate that comment.
Okay, great, because
But
I think...
I don't see why not.
Great. That would be my only concern as well, is kind of making sure that it seemed like a tight 10 feet between where that drop-off was and entering into the building.
Well, it's actually about 20 feet to the face of the building, because the first floor, we kind of recessed it, but yes, we...
Right,
I've
but those
talked-
columns are in the way and that
Correct.
sort of thing, so I just felt like
Sure.
to kind of, if you're okay with modifying that, I think that was really my only concern.
Yes, we'll work with Lucinda as well to see what's optimal, both in design and from the city's perspective.
Okay, and then the only other thing that I noticed in the fly-around that wasn't in the materials, maybe it was in the elevations that were a little hard to read, but the facade of the parking deck on the back there
Yes.
is pretty darn plain back there. And I didn't look at a Google map to see what's happening. Like, is that even visible, or is it?
So as far as I can tell from the Google Earth, and I was driving around it too, it's not really visible from, and it's pretty far from the next development across the train tracks, right? And then the development across the train track doesn't rise very high, if you will, above the berms there. So we thought it would be okay. And we also have the knee walls, right, at 48-inch high currently, so that it blocks off all the headlamp or the headlight spillage.
So I know it's a cost thing probably, but I wouldn't mind if y'all took a look at that.
We'll
If
take a look.
indeed it's visible, it's the only part of the project that just kind of falls short compared to the rest of the beautiful design that you have.
All right, take a look.
Any other questions?
Yeah, are you okay with providing additional fenestration on the first floor, Divine Street elevation?
That, I think we need to review it. If you can see the plan up there, along your right side is a Divine Street, and about half of it, we do have fenestrations, the empty spaces, correct. So, because all of those are retail. And we can look into adding glass for the bike storage there, but that's all the bike storage. We're providing enough count per the zoning. But below that, it's all back of house spaces.
You speaking into the microphone a little bit?
Oh, I'm sorry. So the two white spaces from the top, they're all retail, right? So that could definitely be, we currently have it as storefronts, windows. The space below it is a bike storage room, and we can review adding more windows to it. But anything beyond that, we have a trash pickup room, trash compactor, and a boiler room, and then you have the parking entrance there. So it's a little bit hard to put windows there, and we figured because Divine Street is closed now, right? So there won't be too much traffic going towards the Divine Street. So that's where we thought it'd be more appropriate to stop the storefront.
So you're okay with at least maybe introducing some glazing right there by the bike storage?
Yes,
area?
we'll definitely
Yeah.
look at that, yep.
Okay.
I mean, even if it wasn't I guess, and if it was just glazing that, wasn't operable, that's not the right word, but some sort of windows or.
Yes, so, I mean, below the bike storage is our trash pickup, that's where our overhead doors. So I mean, it's not just a blank wall, there would be a overhead cooling door, sorry. And we have a bunch of other doors, but we could definitely address the bike storage area there more. And then we could introduce, maybe reveals, and see the bottom mast there by the bottom right-hand corner of the parking deck. We could introduce like reveals so that's not a blank wall.
I think that would be helpful, too.
Do you mind pulling up the elevation of that?
Sure. It's not this one. It is this one. It's the one on the bottom, right? So you can see from the right side, the drawing on the bottom, all the way on the right side is your Gaston Street, right? And what Lucinda's just pointing to, that's the bike storage room that we could turn into either storefronts, although I honestly don't want to because of bike storage, but we could introduce reveals there too. And then the space just to the left of that was a coiling door for the compactor, right? And then if you go a little bit more to the left, that opening, just a little bit more left, yes, thank you. That would be the parking entry there. So it's not just a blank wall, but we'll definitely review how we can make it more, or we could dress it up more.
Any other questions?
I want clarification on the finishes. You briefly showed us the brick
Yes,
and stucco, right? Brick and stucco, correct?
brick and precast.
Precast.
Well,
Precast.
what's the finishes on the building? Get back to the one with the one before this. Anything shown in red is brick, correct?
Yes, anything red is brick, correct.
All right, and what are the finishes between the brick?
Finish between the brick would be the precast panels, two different colors. One would be dark, one would be lighter, but they will be all precast panels.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Kim.
Thank you.
All right, we will now hear comments from the public. All right, would anyone like to make a motion?
I will. I move to, or Chairman, I move to approve the request for a certificate of design approval for new construction at 737 Gadsden Street with the following conditions. Reconfigure the Gadsden Street drop-off zone to be a continuous lane adjacent to the curb with bump outs and reducing the building setback accordingly. Explore providing additional fenestration on the first floor Divine Street elevation. All signage be reviewed and approved by staff and must meet the Innovista design guidelines, and all other details be deferred to staff for review and approval.
Second.
I'd like to amend the motion. Do we vote on this first, or do we do amendment first?
With it having been seconded, I think now it goes to a vote. If that fails, we can propose an amended motion or a new motion.
Well, I didn't have a chance.
Although I guess technically there should be an amount of time to offer up an amendment. So let's hear what you got and see if anyone wants to second that.
I think I can amend my motion, right? I can amend my motion.
So the only thing I would request that we amend is to not necessarily require the reducing of the building setback accordingly, but to keep the first part of your motion on that point, and along with referring the details to staff to also include reviewing the parking deck facade on the back along whatever street that is.
Can I amend, I can amend my motion, right?
To
I'll
include
second
those
that.
things.
Okay. Yes, I will amend the motion to remove the condition of reducing the building setback requirement. Let's keep that as a consideration. And also, what was your second one?
To review the facade on the back part of the garage.
To review the facade on the backside of the parking deck with staff.
I second that.
Mr. Broom?
Yes.
Ms. Sims Branham?
Yes.
Mr. Dinkins?
Yes.
Mr. Salibi?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolf? The motion passes.
All right, on to the next project.
All right. So the next case is, this is 1206 Bull Street. This is a request for certificate of design approval for new construction in the City Center Design Development District. The proposal is for a new, approximately 3,500 square foot branch bank office at the northeast corner of Gervais and Bull Streets with a single-lane drive-through. The existing two-story building on the north property line at 1206 Bull has been demolished. Just to clarify on the aerial, it's still in there. And I will read the staff recommendation, and then the applicant and the architect are here. The staff recommends approval of the request with the condition that the following items be revised and deferred to staff for approval: to increase glazing percentages along Gervais Street to at least 50%, to explore more human-scaled features and details along the street frontage to enhance the pedestrian environment, to work with both city and SCDOT staff to configure the right-of-way improvements to include trees, decorative street lighting, and other details, to ensure all signage meets the zoning and city center design guidelines, and that all other details be deferred to staff. And Lassane Monteith is the architect, and he's going to talk about the project.
Good afternoon. If you would please state your name and whether you swear to tell the truth in
Yes.
these proceedings.
My name is Lassane Monteith. I'm the architect for a small branch bank for Optus Bank. Optus Bank now has its main office on the 1200 block on Main Street, but they've selected this corner for a couple of reasons. One, they've done a lot of work rebranding their bank over the years, and this is a very prominent corner, which would give them a lot of visibility. It will also give them something they don't have at their main branch, which is a drive-through capability. Lucinda, how do I get, I'd like to start with the renderings. No, well, let's start with site plan. I'm sort of humbled after the previous submission, and this is definitely an underdevelopment, but this is a very small building, a little over 5,000 feet counting both floors, and the site plan is quite simple. It has counterclockwise location around the building, entered from Gervais Street and exiting on Bull Street. We have 9 off-street parking spaces plus a drive under canopy. There will be an ATM machine and perhaps some other things we haven't worked out yet. For example, electric charging stations for electric vehicles and that sort of thing. I think we've indicated equipment in certain places on there, but that's still a little flexible, I would hope. How do I get to I think the renderings are the best way to start. How do I go? Yeah. Okay. Which one advances it? That one. Okay. It's a simple building. The material on the building primarily is metallic panels, clear anodized aluminum panels. I have a couple of samples here, which I'll bring forward.
Oh, wow, you know.
In essence, the entire building is to be clear anodized aluminum panels, with the exception perhaps of 2 solid panels, which you see in the rendering. Those came about because the bank didn't want any windows into the vault, obviously. And there's a conference room on the other corner, and they prefer not to have people walking by the street looking into that room, since it has purposes other than just functions of the branch bank. And it's very simple counterclockwise circulation around the building. And several issues are not resolved. One is street lighting. I've noticed that there are now, I think, 3 of the traditional lights that the city has used throughout the city, really, in a lot of ways. There are the lamps, but we'd certainly be willing to put one of those in each of our elevations, or more if needed. We'd like to have that left up to staff, if we might, as to the spacing of those particular lights. Very simple building. All the mechanical equipment will be concealed by the parapet on top of the building. There's none of it at grade. And it's just a typical branch bank. Well, it's not that typical, I hope.
Is that all?
I'm
we open up
done
to-
unless you have questions.
Very good. Any questions from DDRC members?
Yeah, I have a question, Mr. Chair. So, Lassane, so you don't, I get that the vault needs to have that solid red wall, but,
Well, we don't know that that's a red wall. Right now, it's shown on our elevations as Alucobond panels, which is clear anodized aluminum. Of course, they make those panels in a myriad of colors.
oh, no, I'm fine with the red. I was just, back to the staff comments about more glazing along Gervais Street. Since this is an office, and I understand the privacy factor, but do you see any way to perhaps move that red and open up the glazing, a sliver of, at least a little more glazing in
Well,
the office, and then move the red
On the
solid?
floor plan, both of those spaces on the right-hand end of this rendering do have windows that face the drive on the eastern end of the building. They're not completely without daylight, but I think that it's just logical that these things, when we blanked them in on the first floor, we felt that it looked a lot better just to carry it up to the second floor, and the bank acquiesced to that. And we'd like to have the option perhaps of using stucco where that solid panel is shown, not so much because of cost or anything. I'm sorry? Because of cost, but just to get some sort of tactile texture in the building other than something that's very slick and shiny. But and I would hope that could be left between us and staff to make that decision. We've worked with them before. This corner is a very important corner in a lot of ways. For one thing, we're right across the street from the University of South Carolina School of Law, which Ms. Branham's and her firm designed. In fact, I was serving on this commission when the design was approved. We're very happy to be across the street. I think it's one of the more responsible buildings that the university has built in the last few years. I think it will stand its test of time better than some of the other things they put up. Diagonally across the street is a WS television station, which, as a much younger architect, I doubled in size years ago. And so I have some familiarity with that. The other corner is a filling station and convenience store, and we can't do too much about that. But we all trying to strive for a walkable city, but we're a long way from that right now. So people downtown, I guess, need gasoline like the rest of us. So we just live with the filling station and convenience store. Although I have seen examples of more sympathetic way of doing gas stations than that one, but it's pretty much new, so I guess we're going to have to live with it for a while.
So thank you, Lisanne, on the compliment of the law school. However, it actually wasn't my firm that designed it, but I agree with you that it is a handsome building in that area. It's a shame that across the street didn't quite match the architectural beauty of the street, of the law school across the street. But I think this will be a nice addition to that corner, Lisanne. I think what we're just trying to get to is whether it's stucco or another metal panel with the red accent, or if it's a different color, is just opening up a bit more of the glazing. Do you have a problem with, what I was thinking is if you could show the other elevation of the back or
Let's
back
see.
side,
Let me
like
see
if
I-
you could.
Let me see if I can work this device. This commission's come a long way since I served on it.
That perhaps, you have a slit window on the back side of that office, on the side of the office?
Oh, that's the side with the drive-through.
Yeah, right here, Lisanne. So you see how you have that slit window right under the other corner, right, that goes into
Right.
that office? Perhaps
Well,
it could flip to the other side, and then you could put the panel there to me, I don't know that it'd meet the exact 50% of glazing, but it would allow a little more glazing, and it could still end with that black panel, so you wouldn't have to have signage all the way across where the red is, that it could just flip to that other elevation, is what I'm proposing. In other words, just take the slit and move it in the office, that larger office, move it to the Gervais Street side instead of the parking lot.
Well, we would.
Might be a nicer view for
We
the
would
person in the office as
We would prefer
well.
not to, and the reason we have the solid panel is so that one walking by just doesn't look into this fairly large conference room on that floor. But, I mean, we'll do
Well, that's an office.
We'll do whatever it takes.
You
you-
can't see that side of the building as you're walking up the street, right? The rear.
I'm sorry?
I mean, you can see that side of the back side, I believe, as you're walking up the street. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah,
I think so.
you can see all sides of this building from the street.
I mean, I would just propose that red, if you're driving down Gervais, you'd see that red panel a lot better on the facade that's facing the parking lot as opposed to, anyway, it's just a consideration to meet with the staff saying that a little bit more glazing on just the Gervais Street, not necessarily where the vault is, because clearly that has to be
Well-
a solid wall. So that may just be something, a consideration that y'all could look at.
Another unresolved issue is the digital sign, which is shown on the building there. We're waiting for some information from Hope Hasty, the zoning administrator, on what we actually can do.
Right.
I'd hoped maybe to get the sign away from the windows and put it on that solid area if we could get up proportions that work for a digital sign. But anyway, that's still up in the air as to the signs there. I mean, it's we've run into some problems in our rendering. We showed some businesses that are customers of the bank, and apparently that's not permitted as I understand it, but the bank does not intend to put any advertisements on the sign other than things having to do with the bank itself. I mean, rates for car loans and mortgages and that sort of thing. But still, that's up in the air.
Right, so I know that'll be a detail that we'll defer to staff to work with you on, but the only other issue I was going to ask you about is kind of the entry element and bringing down the pedestrian scale that was mentioned. So it does seem like if you look at this elevation, here's the guy at the teller outside the machine outside, and with that roof being so high, I don't think he's not going to be in and out of the rain at that height.
mean
So
the-
perhaps
the-
bringing in another, I think the staff is recommending, as I am, that there may be a lowered entry canopy that
I
could.
think that might be something that comes concomitantly with the piece of equipment, that there's some sort of shielding there. It's designed to be used totally outdoors if needed, so.
But I think we're talking about, Lisanne, coming in underneath that digital sign and actually coming out with another awning, so to speak, or a metal element that would
Oh,
cover
you're
you.
concerned about the entry on the corner?
Exactly, that the height of that, where the sign is, that it's not a pedestrian trail because it's so high, and that perhaps leaving it where it is, but then introducing another element that would be a canopy a little bit above, almost where that joint is on the glazing?
I presume we could make that panel that supports the cantilevered office on the second floor, we could make that deeper and lower the ceiling height.
I think we're talking about actually introducing another element that would bring the scale down just a bit at that corner. Yeah, point to it, listen. Right. That, just to bring in another entry canopy at that scale, at that elevation.
Well, what would be wrong with making that panel that supports that cantilevered corner office deep enough to basically lower that?
You're saying that the metal panel would be deeper?
It could be. I don't know how it would work. We haven't studied it.
I think
but-
any way you come up with that, I think just if we could address the scale factor, I leave it up
Okay, so
to you and staff.
You would like it lower going into the corner entrance? And
Just again to
we can
respond to the
We can
pedestrian.
certainly do that one way or another.
Okay, yeah, I'm not dictating how it's done, just to take a look at it.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Where are you in your discussions with city and DOT with respect to the entrances and exits? And
We have secured approval from DOT for basically where the entrances are located. We had hoped to use existing curb cuts. We may not be able to do that. They've given us an extremely detailed set of things we have to follow as far as turning radius, that sort of thing, which we'll follow religiously. So it's been approved by DOT.
so the site plan is, I'm looking at, DOT has approved all the entrances and exits?
Well, Al Saad, the developer of the project, is here, and he handled the negotiations with DOT. Al, do you want to address that?
I apologize. If you're going to address the commission, you have to come up to the podium. Although, before we move to that, I have a question for the architect, if it now would be appropriate. So one of the guidelines suggests consistency in architectural theme with surrounding buildings. And you mentioned two other very beautiful buildings, the law school and WIS-TV building, both of which I think contain a significant amount of brick. And so do other buildings in the immediate vicinity. Have you considered maybe instead of what's rendered to be red paneling, maybe use of some type of red brick so it's a little more consistent with the surrounding area?
I don't think it will achieve the effect that the bank wants. They want a very jewel-like appearance and that sort of thing. So, not using bricks very intentional in this particular situation.
Interesting. And staff's thoughts on that, considering the guidelines?
Let's see. I think I mentioned it in here, but it does mention that the two-story contemporary structure of large-scale metal and glass is somewhat of a contrast to the existing buildings in the immediate surroundings. However, there was somewhere in here that there's not while there is a lot of brick in the area, it's not necessarily required.
Right, it's a suggestion.
So it is a little bit of a departure, but, I mean, we see that pretty regularly, so, it's not like the style or there's a consistency of style in that area. There's a lot of variation in the architecture, even though it's a lot of brick, so.
Sure. I'm just trying to be conscious of the kind of feel and the appearance of that area. And this kind of has a,
I guess
downtown
it's a
1980s
good
Miami
question.
vibe
I think
relative to what we have.
I think
I
that,
totally agree with you. I mean, it looks like nothing else that.
So let me ask you back, so I pulled an elevation on that side of the street, and I know the Midas is a new addition there, and it's brick, but I wouldn't say consistent with the color of brick that's everywhere around it either. But is this building stucco that's next to it? I'm not sure what that little guy is that, I don't even know.
That's our beauty salon.
So, but is that material stucco? I mean, could
It's
that?
stucco.
I think it is stucco.
So that might help if you go back to stucco, like you were talking about, Lassane, that might help a little bit without, I think, though, I agree with the fact that the other two buildings are more in keeping with, well, I think the law school was in keeping with the historic neighborhood and things behind it, but there's a lot happening along Gervais that isn't necessarily in keeping with that. But I think they could still maintain kind of this more contemporary approach to the bank's kind of image that they're trying to portray, but maybe introducing stucco, something other than metal panels might be the solution. And if it can't be brick, perhaps just because there's a breakup of, I think the hotel down the street, which I didn't get, the new Home 2 or whatever that thing is
right.
called, it's got some metal panels on it as well. So it's kind of a combination of that sort of thing. But I agree, I don't know that I'd want to force the brick element here, but I think if we could consider stucco, that would help.
So the
be a
stucco.
Yeah, and I think the applicant recommend, or suggested they'd be open to considering stucco, is that correct?
Is
as
that an
material
approved
instead of metal
material?
panel?
No,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
I
thank
think
you.
it's stucco covered over the
one of the
brick.
reasons I'd like to see stucco is to get a different tactile feel.
Exactly, that would be
And
nice
I
too.
see the stucco as being smooth, I saw it as being stippled, or having some sort of texture to it.
Which might be a nice contrast, is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree.
Agreed. All
I
right, thank you.
think Tillman looks like the stucco was probably covering over the original brick. The entire side of the building it's all brick except for that front piece.
Yeah. It's a tough elevation.
Yeah, thank you for, just to finish up, to answer your question, that was better articulated. I think when staff first saw the design, it was, it's a very contemporary, modern design, and trying to introduce brick, while that was acknowledged, it felt like it wouldn't really fit with the design, so it felt like it would have been forced. I think that's a good suggestion, though. Maybe stucco would help it blend with the next-door neighbor without really changing the style, because it is very modern. But that was kind of sort
Of
of
course, you
where
have
we
the
were
gas
coming
station
from.
across the street
Oh,
that's
yes,
all
the shining
metal
street.
panel,
True, too.
and,
All right, any other questions for Mr. Monteith?
I noticed on the submittal, there were two different site plans, one with the angled parks adjacent to the Midas parking lot, and the other with the head end. Which one?
The latest site plan is one with the angle parking.
Okay.
We have 9 off-street parking spaces. Curiously, none are required, by zoning.
Yep. I was just curious which one we were going off of.
The one with the angle parking spaces, and there was a mistake with our civil engineer to start with. He'd shown an entrance off of Bull Street, which made sense at that point to some degree because we had perpendicular parking in that site plan, but to get a required 5-foot setback from the right-of-way, we had to go to angle parking, but I think everyone's happy with the plan and the clearances work.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Monteith.
Do you need,
Yeah,
do you need
I would-
Mr. Saw to address the DOT?
I would like for him to. I'm concerned about the access points and the conflicts. So I'd like to hear where you stand with the city and with DOT. I think they both, in the downtown area, they kind of have a dual jurisdiction with the.
I mean, from, if you're asking for the purview, I guess, from the DDRC standpoint, the pedestrian access to the building, which is on the corner, is appropriate. The site is small, and there's just not really a whole lot of choices, so that's probably why DOT approved it, because they have to allow access to the property. But there's a
Typically-
limited amount of purview for the DDRC to talk about vehicular access points.
It's not really the access, it's, I guess, the interaction with the pedestrians, too. You have a extremely wide, in a sense, like dual exit from the drive-through and from the parking lot, and right into the pedestrian, I guess, which, is somewhat of going to be a corridor. I'm not sure of any other options either, but in general, DOT, if you are going to demolish and, if you change the use of a site, I mean, there's no, you can't necessarily use your existing access points. They have to meet code. So, I mean, I would just like to hear again where you stand with that review, or I mean, if they approve
All right,
it.
so if you would please state your name and whether you swear to tell the truth in these proceedings, please.
My name is Al Saad, and I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you, sir.
I met with the Department of Transportation with the original drawing, which showed 2 exits and 1 entrance, and they did not like, they said if we would eliminate the entrance, the entrance on from Bull Street, they would approve the 2 exits on Bull Street.
So
So
they
it has-
haven't, but you've met with them and they said if you made these changes, they would.
Yes. Along with the setbacks that Lassane has added, we dropped back the building back 5 feet. We did drop it back 5 feet. That was their only.
And the streetscape improvements, the city, you've met with the city regarding, plantings and sidewalks and what they want along both right-of-ways?
I haven't. Have you?
We had one earlier. We've got a little bit more land to plan on right now, but we do plan to, if you'll let us meet with staff and decide what vegetation is needed there, and we'll comply. I would assume we're going to have some sort of foundation planting along the Gervais Street and the Bull Street side, and there's probably a low planting there and trees where we've got a place for a tree island there, and there's not a whole lot of landscaping to be done.
The improvements in the right-of-way will have to go through the encroachment process, which will include review by city forestry, public works, planning, urban design. So we will certainly work with them on making sure that all of those improvements meet city standards and design guidelines. But we haven't had those conversations yet.
Any other questions? Thank you both.
Thank you.
We will now hear comments from the public. Hearing none, do I have a motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion, Mr. Chair. I'd like to recommend approval for the request for certificate of design approval for 1501 Gervais Street and 1206 Bull Street with the following recommendations. To increase the glazing percentages along Gervais Street, not necessarily to 50%, but to consider more glazing along just Gervais Street. In keeping with that, to also consider introducing some stucco rather than all of the metal panels to relate better to the surrounding aesthetics, to explore more human-scaled features and details along the street frontage to enhance the pedestrian environment, to work with the city and SCDOT staff to configure the right-of-way improvements to include trees, decorative street lighting, and other details, ensure that all signage meets zoning and city center design guidelines, and all other details deferred to staff.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right.
Mr. Broom? Ms. Sims Branham?
Yes.
Mr. Dinkins?
No.
Mr. Salibi?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. All right. Is there any other business?
don't believe we have any other business, but we do wish you all a very happy holiday.
Motion
You
to
as well.
adjourn?
Y'all, thank you very much. All right, we'll call the meeting adjourned. Thank you,
Motion to
everybody.
adjourn?